At 38, I feel invisible in a world where my wife battles loss while I struggle with my own shortcomings. Nobody even asks how I'm doing, I lament, feeling like a ghost. As family life slips away, will I ever know the joy of fatherhood? Throw away so it is not as easily traceable back to me. I, a 38-year-old male, do not have anyone in my life who genuinely cares about me. Nobody inquires about my well-being. Nobody is aware of what is happening in my life. To clarify, there are individuals who would mourn my absence if I were no longer present, but they do not show any interest in my life. They never initiate text messages to me, and not to sound defeatist or pessimistic, but the reality is that I rarely receive responses to the messages I send first. If I do receive a reply, it usually consists of one or two messages, and then there is silence for months or years, depending on when I choose to reach out again. I understand that people are busy and may forget, yet I would be dishonest if I claimed it does not hurt a little. I am fortunate in that both my parents and my two sisters are alive and healthy. I do not have a strained relationship with any of them, but we could be closer. We all reside in different parts of the country, so we do not see each other often. When we do meet, there is almost always some argument, although most of these disagreements resolve within a day, some linger even now. Both of my sisters are married with children, so I understand why they have less time than they used to. Additionally, my parents are heavily involved in their local community, which keeps them busy. Regarding my friends, I have one close friend who lives somewhat nearby. We meet up around 3 times a year. All my other friends live several hours away. I have two close friends from high school and a few from college. They have all gotten married and have children or are expecting. Texting any of these individuals feels almost like a black hole. Growing up, I was always the computer whiz kid, so I was often the go-to person for computer-related questions. After I went off to college, my family would frequently call me for assistance, and I would enjoy hearing from them, but I often ended these calls feeling like a jerk, with them being thankful for my help but possibly feeling foolish, while I appeared superior and annoyed that they called me only for that reason. Over the years, these kinds of calls decreased. On one hand, I miss anyone reaching out to me for any reason. On the other hand, I resent feeling used for my knowledge. My wife has been experiencing the worst year of her life. I am doing everything I can to support her through her struggles. Yet I am failing miserably. She would be the first to agree with this. I have ruined important dates and have routinely left her feeling unsupported. I do not do this intentionally. It is usually with the best of intentions. I struggle with addictions, whether it has been marijuana, which I have since completely stopped, video games, or whatever my latest obsession is. I am known to make poor decisions. I believe that these decisions, not just within my marriage but throughout my life, have resulted in cordial yet shallow relationships. Consequently, as people's lives have become busier, I have become the one who gets pushed aside to make room for other matters. I do not entirely blame myself, and I certainly do not blame them. I did not grasp how destructive certain actions could be until I examined them closely. Nothing I did was particularly outrageous. Just typical behaviors like yelling, stonewalling, or being a generally unpleasant person. So yes, my wife and I have been struggling lately. She does not feel supported through her multiple family losses over the past year, and I feel exhausted from trying to do everything for her. Before the chaotic last few years, we had a relatively good balance in our household. We both worked full-time and shared the chores evenly. There were a few months when my job demanded significantly more hours from me, so she took on my responsibilities. Her father had been ill for years, which was already difficult for her, but she fell into a deep depression after his passing. I knew I would need to be there for her for an extended period. Immediately, I took on her chores as well except for laundry, which she insists on doing. So name any household chore and I am likely doing it. Vacuuming, washing dishes, feeding the cat and dog, picking up dog waste, cleaning the litter box, mowing and edging the yard, and we have two elderly neighbors, so I tend to their yards as well, weeding, driving us around, taking us out to dinner frequently. I do not do much cooking and she does not wish to, plus she really enjoys dining out. Planning our entertainment and restaurant outings for the evening, bringing her diet sodas, picking up the soda can she leaves everywhere. Purchasing whatever she desires, and I really mean that literally, breaking down boxes and taking out recycling and trash weekly, collecting the mail and cleaning toilets and bathrooms. You get the picture, and I manage this alongside working from 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. Monday through Friday. I struggle to carve out personal time. It often leads to conflict. I have asked for it when she needed my comfort. I have taken personal time at inopportune moments that I regret, such as when she had a flat tire on the side of a highway late at night I was out with a friend, or when her aunt passed away I was playing video games with a friend online. So I am not blameless. I have messed up and let her down too many times, contributing to the turmoil we are currently experiencing. She has had one lifelong dream, to buy her parents a house and alleviate them from their current living situation. Thus, not only did she lose her father and best friend, but she also lost the dream she had cherished for so long. We had one small opportunity before he passed, and and by we I mean I squandered it. It was not until recently that we had a second opportunity. This time we were able to purchase the perfect home for her mother. It is bittersweet to say the least. However, seeing her free from worrying about how to care for her mother is rewarding. I too have had one dream for my entire life. I have always wanted to start a family. Ideally, I want my children to know their grandparents. I never met either of my grandfathers, so I have always wished my children could. It is particularly unfortunate that our children will not know their maternal grandfather. My father told me several times while growing up that I am the last one capable of carrying on the family name since he had no brothers or cousins who had sons. He emphasized that this means little and that he ultimately wants me to pursue what makes me happy in life. But since I desire a family regardless of that, it somewhat aligns. Thus, we have somewhat paused our attempts to start a family until she is more stable, as is our relationship. Prior to this break, we tried to conceive for about 2 years before the tumultuous period began. Here is where things become difficult for me. After undergoing numerous fertility tests, it turns out I hit the jackpot and possess a rare defect on my Y chromosome that leads to extremely low sperm production. Conceiving naturally is statistically improbable, and in vitro fertilization is prohibitively expensive, especially if you are not fortunate enough to obtain viable embryos to implant during the first few attempts. Furthermore, carrying a pregnancy to term is not guaranteed, especially for a first-time mother at 37 years old. The added challenge, my wife and I are Rh incompatible, which adds further risk to an already precarious pregnancy. Even if all these odds are surmounted, if we were to have a boy, he would inherit the same defect on his chromosome that I possess. It is now in the bloodline. I had never considered adoption prior to this diagnosis, but if we can get our lives together, I would like to pursue this option. She is open to it but wishes to contemplate fostering, to which I am less amenable. For approximately the past year, my wife and I have been gradually attempting to accept that our original dreams have vanished. I will never experience the thrill of a positive pregnancy test, nor will I be able to support her through pregnancy or marvel at which physical features or mannerisms our child inherits. I will never have the opportunity to raise another human from its very first breath. I will never know what is often considered the most incredible experience life has to offer. As if that were not enough, I am also trying to avoid feeling like less of a man because of this situation. It has impacted my sexual confidence significantly. On the kinkiness spectrum, I would rate myself around a 3 out of 10, mostly vanilla. With that vanilla came some fairly basic fetishes: meeting an attractive woman, having sexual relations with her, and the thrill of potentially causing her to conceive your cells, essentially reprogramming her body functions to produce your offspring. Sounds exciting, right? That kind of thought would have turned me on previously. Now I struggle to maintain my arousal amidst intrusive thoughts like, yeah, with what sperm, flashing through my mind, as if I needed to be any more self-conscious while masturbating or having sex. It is as though this pain has not only crushed my dreams, it has also extinguished my fantasies. I have never been particularly creative, but given the current circumstances, I thought it would be beneficial to give my mind something to work on. Occasionally, I share my final results with friends and family, but ultimately this pursuit is for my own sake. I just needed something to occupy my thoughts. As my wife and I grapple with our individual depressions, I am striving to stay strong and support her while dealing with my own suffering. As previously mentioned, despite my best efforts, she has not been receiving the support she requires from me. Consequently, she is unwilling to offer me any assistance in return, fearing it will invoke resentment for providing something she has been yearning for herself. I have only confided in my family and therapist about my situation and now read it, I suppose. I have also informed them that we are considering adoption. However, this news is nearly a year old, and none of them have reached out to me to check on how I am doing or inquire about the progress of the adoption, etc. I would understand if they were uncomfortable about not knowing whether it is a sensitive topic. If they wish to wait for me to bring it up, that is fine. But nobody even asks how I am, how my hobbies are progressing, or if I have done anything interesting lately. Nothing. I had a conversation with one of my sisters about a month ago that lasted about 40 minutes. She shared how busy she has been lately with one child's activities and another's. It was nice to catch up. However, about 5 minutes before the call ended, I realized she had not asked how I had been doing. As that thought entered my mind, I felt a sinking pit in my stomach, followed by an invisible hand gripping and squeezing my heart. It was doubt creeping in. The call was concluding and intrusive thoughts were ready to pounce. She remarked, "Well, I suppose that is it. I need to get going. Oh, how have you been? I hadn't even asked yet." Cue more conflicting emotions. I felt grateful she remembered, albeit right before she had to leave for some kid event. I simply replied that I was fine and that nothing significant had occurred since our last conversation. The following day, I spoke with my father, who dominated most of the discussion. When I did manage to interject, I would get only a sentence or two into my narrative before it reminded him of something he felt he had to express immediately lest he forget it. I understand this, but it makes me feel as though what I have to share is less significant than what he has to convey, if it is even important at all. My mother does not really communicate with me. We are not on bad terms, but she is typically preoccupied with playing cards with friends from the community, watching reality television, engaging in Facebook stalking, or sleeping. As for my second sister, she is essentially estranged. I am the only member of the family with whom she still maintains contact, which says something about our relationship. Recently, she moved across the country without bothering to mention it to me. That leaves my therapist, whom I see for an hour every 2 weeks. That is all I have, not just to work on myself, but also to engage in conversation with someone who cares, even if it is only from a professional standpoint. I am simply scared. With each passing day, I fear that I may never experience fatherhood. I believe I would make a good dad, too. I do not comprehend why this has happened to me or why I lack anyone to help me navigate through it. This is likely the longest thing I have ever written. If you have actually read it all, I admire your perseverance. I genuinely appreciate it. Story 2. Rich relatives are spying on me like I'm in a soap opera. You only care about money like your father. I'm just trying to support my grandma while they scheme to control their inherited fortune. Is this a real life or just fantasy? My life is truly like a movie, as it feels quite surreal. Essentially, envision Mark Twain's The Prince and the Pauper, or any narrative depicting a wealthy individual marrying a less fortunate person and merge the two characters into one. That represents me navigating the hardships of both worlds simultaneously. I possess no wealth or influence, yet I must contend with the drama that affluent individuals create to acquire more money from a dying relative or for other reasons. Here is the impoverished perspective of the story. I grew up in a modest environment as the child of immigrants who moved here to pursue education and a better future. My grandmother on my mother's side supported my parents sufficiently for them to eventually become part of the American lower middle class. Being in this socioeconomic category, yet fortunate to attend a better school district, made me susceptible to bullying because I was not wealthy enough, nor did my parents hold doctoral degrees or teach at the local university. My circumstances worsened when my father's abuse escalated, compounded by his infidelity and the financial distress he caused during my elementary school years. My grandmother moved in with us to provide support since my father was virtually absent, but by the time I entered 8th grade, both my mother and grandma became seriously ill and medical expenses began to accumulate. I started working to cover bills when I turned 13, initially on a farm, then fast food at 14, all while striving to excel in school. I forfeited opportunities that many would cherish for undergraduate and graduate school fellowships in order to remain close to home and care for them while managing my studies and job. I appreciated that the local university funded my entire undergraduate education and offered me a stipend, ultimately granting me their most prestigious fellowship for graduate school. Even so, it was insufficient, and I ended up juggling 3 jobs during my undergraduate studies while continuing a side job in addition to my fellowship stipend, merely to scrape together enough to cover my living expenses. Simultaneously, there exists the wealthy perspective. I discovered that my grandmother and her family are affluent individuals, but she disagreed with their values and left that lifestyle behind when she started her own family, achieving some financial success through her own business. However, in her parents' will before their passing, they named her as the sole heir and matriarch of the entire extended family, despite being the youngest sibling, with some relatives being 20 years her senior and having children older than she is. These relatives enjoyed a privileged upbringing until they turned 18, and my grandmother, being kind-hearted, supported her nephews, nieces, grandnieces, and grandnephews' education at prestigious universities worldwide, like Oxford, Cambridge, Harvard, MIT, Princeton, Yale, etc., contributing to their success through the family's fund. Additionally, she chose not to utilize this money for herself or her immediate family, as she did not consider it morally right. While these relatives expressed some gratitude for her assistance, they also aspired to become the next heir to manage the funds, similar to the initial premise in Dune, where individuals compete for dominance. I remained unaware of this until I reached undergraduate studies, just before the COVID-19 pandemic, when she mentioned having to travel to another part of the United States for an extended period and disclosed the situation regarding my extended family. All along, my grandmother had told me she could not afford my tuition, that I had already been removed from her will, that I would require a full scholarship just to attend college, or that she had no funds remaining, along with describing our financial constraints, especially regarding the exorbitant costs of United States healthcare. In fact, it often proved less expensive to fly to another country in business class for top-notch treatment before returning home, all at nearly half the cost of necessary procedures. Even with my grandmother's insurance, she pays $800 monthly and carries a $10,000 deductible, amounting to $20,000 yearly. Essentially, she must approve when the fund is utilized by others, prompting the extended family to ingratiate themselves by inviting her to stay at their homes, calling in private physicians for specific treatments, and convincing her to endorse requests for them to access some funds. Throughout the years, I learned more about this situation, and not long ago, my grandmother informed them and me that she intended to designate me as her heir and next of kin. The extended family did not react favorably to this. First and foremost, they are aware of my immediate family situation, and having someone like my father as a biological parent leads them to presume that I must be similar to him, despite my nature being quite different, i.e., I am not an alcoholic or an abusive sociopath. Secondly, I lack the pedigree in terms of education, having attended a public school lacking a prestigious name, whereas they attended top institutions. Thirdly, they accused me of caring for my grandmother merely for financial gain, contrary to the kindness I showed, as I had no knowledge of this situation until I reached college. Subsequently, these affluent relatives began to interfere in my life, employing private investigators to scrutinize my actions and uncover any dirt. This became quite bothersome as they tracked my every movement to the extent of knowing where I went, whom I met, and even associating with my research collaborators to assess my progress. It seemed fictitious and surreal until my grandmother or I overheard them making comments about my life. Of course, it was unsettling when they informed me about my romantic involvement with someone who, unbeknownst to me at the time, was also seeing others, despite our relationship being official for months and her asserting that our connection was exclusive. Unfortunately, I cannot even date or live my own life freely, as they monitor my relationships and conduct background checks on anyone I see. If they report factual information, that is one thing, but they distort the details to portray me in a negative light, making it seem as though I acted inappropriately when I did not. Additionally, they pressured me into ending relationships with my past partners, deeming them inadequate based on their education, current employment, or backgrounds. Their meddling and absurd behavior led to 3 breakups, yet they insist the fault lies solely with me. A recent incident illustrates this. I met a girl a month ago and we became official about a week ago. They employed a private investigator to monitor us last Friday and informed my grandmother of our dinner plans, claiming that the person I was seeing had multiple concurrent partners. The issue is she is a medical student preparing for exams while juggling 2 jobs, and she explicitly told me when we began dating that she could not manage anything else besides work, school, and seeing me. After aggravating my grandmother with fabricated information, the extended relative received permission to attend our date, and they followed us to her home after I dropped her off. Yesterday, I got a bit of payback. I pretended to be driving to her place, but turned halfway to hide and observe what information they would relay to my grandmother. Sure enough, they falsely claimed I visited her, despite her having gone home for the weekend to see her parents, thus she was out of town and not seeing my car at her place. They instead asserted that I passed a business near her location. I provided my grandmother with time-stamped photos and location data from Find My iPhone, and she sided with me on this matter. However, she still harbors doubts about the character of my girlfriend, so this relationship appears to be heading toward a similar fate as the others, excluding the one who was unfaithful. Moreover, these relatives did not assist me or my grandmother when we needed it most. They could have easily contributed a small amount during our time of need, rather than forcing me to survive on less than 3 hours of sleep daily in order to secure scholarships based on my academic performance, i.e. merit-based scholarships or acceptance into notable institutions with generous financial aid like Princeton, while working a minimum wage job to support both myself and my family. If they were unwilling to assist, instead of criticizing me for attending a less favorable school that offered tuition, room, board, and a combined stipend of about $10,000 per year, they could have covered the remaining expenses that financial aid could not manage at the top 5 university I was accepted to for undergraduate studies, which was $7,000 per year, or at least co-sign my student loans for that sum throughout undergrad. Instead of hiring private investigators and informants to gather dirt on me, they could have employed caregivers to assist my grandmother or contributed to her medical expenses if they genuinely cared for her throughout this ordeal. I never asked for this and I do not even care about the money. I have reached this stage in my education due to my hard work despite my circumstances. I owe nothing to these individuals and I cannot tolerate the drama surrounding me, especially regarding something I was unaware of until a few years ago. Additionally, I have always disliked fantasy-like narratives because ultimately people seem to prioritize wealth, and I do not value the wealth we are discussing here. While financial stability is advantageous, I am accustomed to a life without much. In fact, if I were earning a high 5-figure salary right now while still tending to my mother and grandmother, i.e., covering their medical costs, etc., I would consider myself financially successful. For context, we reside in an area with an exceptionally low cost of living. It is also amusing how these individuals embody the stereotypes depicted in movies or television shows, but lack the self-awareness to acknowledge it, nor do they feel guilt over adversely affecting another person's life, particularly someone with whom they ostensibly share familial ties. I am exhausted from dealing with unnecessary nonsense that I want no part of and gain nothing from confronting. I simply wish to care for my grandmother until she passes because she looked after me and supported me during my childhood, and I feel a sense of obligation toward her, and perhaps my mother until she transitions to a retirement home. Afterward, I hope to lead my own life and eventually start a family or something that allows me to evade circumstances such as this, embracing a lifestyle more in line with something not resembling a corny Korean drama, all while earning a comfortable salary. I sincerely wish I were fabricating this story, or if only I could awaken most of the time, as it contributes significantly to my stress from being observed. I have visited numerous therapists and psychiatrists, many of whom suspected I was schizophrenic until I provided evidence, such as messages from my ex-partners indicating they felt someone was following them, or my taking photos or videos of individuals trailing me. I have reached my breaking point, as therapists and psychiatrists tend to give up on me, either due to their shock at my situation or their uncertainty regarding how to address my deep-seated trauma. You might wonder why I do not pursue restraining orders at a minimum. I did so they do not confront me directly, but it proves difficult to get restraining orders against private investigators since they can simply hire another one due to their financial resources. Thank you for taking the time to read this. I welcome any comments, questions, or advice. I understand if you do not believe a word of this, but unfortunately, it is my reality regardless of your beliefs. This account is also a throwaway for obvious reasons. Summary: my life contains elements you would expect to see in a K-drama, and I am weary of everything I must navigate, particularly the constant feeling of being monitored. Story 3. My 25-year-old boyfriend accused me, a 19-year-old, of sexting my 16-year-old friend over a meme saying, "A male kid sent you a sex meme." He can't grasp that our queer friend group isn't creepy. Now he calls me weird for talking to younger friends. Is he right, or am I losing my mind? This is an event that occurred 2 years ago. I am 21 now, but it continues to weigh heavily on my mind because he still frequently makes very strange accusations toward me concerning my younger friends. I suppose I will explain everything in chronological order. 4 years ago, I was 17, and I became part of a mixed-gender, very queer friend group consisting of individuals aged 14 to 18. We initially met on a Discord server for a series or show, but grew closer and formed our own friend group with a dedicated server. We are very close to each other, and there was practically nothing that was too much information. As we were all chronically online teenagers going through puberty, we tended to overshare a lot, sometimes including sexual matters. For instance, when I turned 18 and began my first relationship where I could actually meet the person in person, I shared with everyone what it was like to experience sex for the first time. None of it felt inappropriate or sexual to us. It was more akin to how people or girls might discuss such topics at a slumber party. It was simply the nature of our friend group to talk about those things and to support each other through our teenage journeys. We also discuss other topics, of course. One channel in our server was designated for not safe for work memes that we shared, not because we were directing them at each other, but so that each of us could send them to our respective partners. This detail will be important later in the story. As time passed, I turned 19 in March of 2023, and during that year I started to grow out of the oversharing phase, feeling more like an older sister to my younger friends. Instead of discussing myself or sending the not safe for work memes, I focused on listening and providing advice. The friend group became less active as we all had many personal matters to attend to, since COVID-19 is no longer as relevant as when our friend group initially formed. However, we still remain very close and share life updates whenever possible. In August 2023, I began dating my boyfriend, who was 25 years old. About 3 weeks into the relationship, the accusation arose, and here's how it unfolded. One friend from the group, whom I will refer to as R, who is 16, sent me a not safe for work meme on Instagram saying, "Send this to your boyfriend, lol." I did not perceive anything negative about it because, although I had somewhat outgrown that behavior, I knew my friend did not realize this since I had never announced it or anything to the group, and he meant no harm. I found it amusing, took a screenshot of the conversation, and sent it to my boyfriend. Then I was bombarded with an extremely negative reaction. He began telling me how utterly inappropriate it was and kept insisting, "A male kid sent you a sex meme," disregarding all the context, and most importantly, the part where my friend instructed me to send it to my boyfriend. I attempted to explain the dynamics of our friend group and how the meme was not directed toward me, emphasizing that my friend had zero intentions like that toward me. not only because he is a minor but also because he is gay. My boyfriend then started accusing me of sexting my friend, stating, "Who knows what else goes on," when in reality there is nothing. It was a harmless meme intended for me to share with my boyfriend, something our friend group always did, yet no matter how I tried to explain, he refused to listen. He also began calling me creepy for being friends with a minor, despite the fact that I had technically just turned an adult 1 year ago and we had been friends since I was 17, and we were close in age. Of course, after his reaction, I informed my friend that we felt uncomfortable receiving such memes from now on, and my friend completely understood. However, that did not stop my boyfriend from continuously throwing bizarre accusations at me and treating me like I am a creep. He insisted that it is extremely strange how my friend group operates, saying he cannot imagine feeling comfortable discussing sex at all with friends, but he refused to see it from my perspective. He would not comprehend that discussing sex does not imply being sexual with the person. He does not understand that I was a very isolated child, bullied, etc., and am chronically online, and that my friends are similar, so we feel comfortable oversharing with each other. He fails to recognize that when I was younger, 15 to 16, I was also part of another queer friend group where most members were older than me, 18 to 20, and openly discussed sex with me, not in a creepy manner, helping me feel more comfortable with my sexuality. I come from a very conservative country that shames women for their sexuality and understand the real-life logistics through their experiences. Therefore, my friend group being like this does not seem strange to me. He compelled me to admit and verbalize that my friend and I were being inappropriate, and that was how we moved on from that incident. He refused to listen to anything I said, and I grew tired of trying to explain. I still believe that neither my friend nor I did anything wrong. He had no bad intentions, and our friendship dynamic is not strange since we were all just teenagers navigating our teenage years together. Is it normal for every friend group to operate this way? Obviously not, but is it wrong? Absolutely not, in my opinion. I just want to know, I suppose, if others see this the same way I do or if I actually did something wrong. It feels as though I am going insane. To clarify what I mentioned in the first paragraph of this post, yes, he still makes strange accusations about me and my younger friends. On one occasion, I sent a letter to a friend I know through my sister. Since I am fond of sending mail, I love sending it to everyone and their parent if permitted. He is aware of this, yet when he discovered I had done so, he immediately remarked that it was suspicious because why are you mailing to a 16-year-old? When the letter merely contained messages asking how they were doing and sharing that I would be starting university soon, hoping everything was well. Another time, he observed me replying to someone on Twitter, a little too enthusiastically on their post asking who wanted to be friends or interact more, and he began accusing me of attempting to seek out kids on purpose to talk about not safe for work matters. Simply because that person was 18 years old, merely 3 years younger than me, a normal age gap between friends, and my bio states will tag not safe for work, which has been there since I sometimes discuss my characters and their stories, and those narratives can involve mature topics such as sex, suicide, abuse, etc. He claimed I would seek out that person in direct messages to discuss sex in detail when that is so far from the truth. He continued implying that it was strange for me to interact with an 18-year-old who was much younger than me and is just a kid. Yet when I questioned him about how it was acceptable for him to approach me when I was 19 and he was nearly 25, he argued it was because I was a new adult while that person was simply a child, which is ludicrous when there is only a 1-year difference, yet his age gap is even larger. He further asserted that he was just being realistic and telling me how it is, and that he is very grounded in reality and believes I need to stop living in my bubble thinking it is normal. I just feel utterly drained. There are additional instances, but it would take a considerable amount of time to list them all. It is just so exhausting to contend with these absurd accusations that are so distorted from reality. Moreover, it is incredibly insulting to be told such things as if I am some sort of child groomer when I was a victim of grooming between the ages of 13 and 15. And since being free from that experience, I do everything I can to ensure all my younger friends are protected from it. I genuinely despise my boyfriend for continuously making normal things seem strange because he can't manage to be normal, and I am eager to be rid of him soon once some matters are sorted out. I had to share this on a throwaway account since he follows my main Reddit account, and if he discovered it, he would give me a lot of grief. He already consistently claims that I crave validation and attention from Reddit and Twitter, and that I need supporters to agree with me, his exact words, whenever I post something I am dissatisfied with, even though most of the time I simply wanted to vent for the sake of doing so and am never trying to solicit comfort from others. Story 4. After a whirlwind romance with a 24-year-old, I found myself questioning everything. You're not allowed to, never my words, but she accused me of jealousy. Days later, she was posting her new boyfriend on social media. Now, at 25, I struggle to trust and love again. What went wrong? Long story. Let us begin by stating that before I met my ex, I connected easily with others, trusted people readily, and fell in love quite quickly. After our relationship ended, I became much more conservative. I struggle with trusting people, do not fall in love as quickly as I once did, and while I still connect with others well, it takes me longer to feel comfortable. She was 24 years old and I was 33 years old. We met online and hit it off immediately. After several years of not communicating due to various life events, we resumed contact around September of 2023. A month later, we met in person for the first time, and there was an incredible energy and chemistry between us. A week later, we decided to explore where things might lead, and this developed into a 5-month-long relationship. While much of the relationship was wonderful, the aspects that were not great were not just mediocre. They were genuinely bad. Without delving into too much detail, I had an online persona a few years ago, which occasionally led to me being recognized in public by teenagers who wanted a quick selfie with me. This was mostly harmless and only took about 10 to 15 seconds of my time. However, she viewed it as something that should not make me feel good since they were laughing at my expense. I explained to her numerous times that I did not care about what people who did not know me personally thought of me, and that it shouldn't concern her what they thought since I treated her well and was her partner. She always claimed to be happy to be with me. However, shortly after we began our relationship, she expressed her dislike for being out in public with me due to this situation. She was afraid that those children might start to associate her with me and request photographs with her as well, so we began going out less and less, until even grocery shopping became something we did separately. Yet she began communicating more frequently with her ex and her male online best friend, two separate individuals. I was fine with her chatting with her ex and playing video games. Why wouldn't I be? They were in a long-distance relationship after all, so I didn't mind at all. My only concern arose when I noticed that he was becoming quite amicable with her. When I expressed my feelings, she informed me that she had not told him about our relationship because she feared his reaction, stating she still valued him as a person and did not want to jeopardize that, assuring me that he was no longer a threat. Regarding her male online best friend, I was also fine with their communication. She could do anything with whomever, provided there were clear boundaries, of course. However, he also had no knowledge of our relationship, and when I asked her if she would consider texting him less or putting her phone away more often when we were together, she responded, "No, I am allowed to have this much contact. He is just a friend. That is what you do with a friend. The fact that you do not text your friends much when we are together is unhealthy as well." Yet the distinction was that I did not text my friends 100 to 200 times a day like they did, and the friends I did communicate with were all aware of my relationship with her, unlike him. She did not want to tell him because she thought it was not necessary. When she informed me she wanted to meet up with him, I felt a bit uneasy but trusted her, so I asked if she could at least stand up for herself if he attempted anything inappropriate, and to let me know when she arrived and returned home. I do not know what occurred, but she interpreted my inquiries as a lack of trust, jealousy, insecurity, and control. It appeared she did not appreciate my wish to discuss her communication with him again. That is not all. I remember her calling me to say she had informed her colleagues about me. When she said, "I told them I am seeing someone," I responded, "Seeing someone? We are a couple," and she seemed visibly unhappy with my reaction. The last event we attended together was a birthday party where all the family members on her father's side would be, including her 15-year-old nephew. Initially, she did not want to bring me because she was afraid he might recognize me. We had an argument over this issue, but she eventually relented. What I could not reconcile was her continued texting with that male friend throughout the birthday party. 2 days later, she told me she had informed him. I replied, "Oh, what a relief." She once again appeared upset and we ended the call after I apologized for my response, explaining that I felt this way because I questioned why she had hidden me from him for 5 months. I never outright told her, "You are not allowed to," or "I do not want you to," or just no. I always asked, "Are you okay with? Can we discuss? Can we look for a compromise?" We rarely argued or had fights, but I greatly valued communication and the pursuit of compromises. However, her frequent response was, "That's a you problem, I cannot do anything about that," whenever I wanted to address something that bothered me, and I hoped we could resolve it together. The next day we discussed it again, and I explained that I found it healthy to take pride in my girlfriend and to tell others about her, as that is how one typically behaves with someone they love and are happy with, right? She did not share this perspective and felt I wanted to flaunt her. She considered my concerns, including my reaction, to be unhealthy. I was labeled jealous for asking many questions about their ongoing communication, insecure for wanting her to notify me when she arrived at his place and left, and controlling for urging her to text him less and to set her phone aside more when we were together. I was also accused of being afraid of her interactions with other men because I made an issue out of her contact with him and her ex. Furthermore, she believed that I wanted to communicate too much. I support open communication, finding compromises whenever feasible, and striving for each other. I confided in her that I was afraid of losing her. I did not mean it literally, but rather as a figure of speech. The day after that conversation, she ended our relationship. I essentially accepted this, as it demonstrated our incompatibility and differing views on what was healthy in a relationship. It had simply run its course. However, 2 days later, she began a relationship with him. While she concealed me from her social media accounts, stating, "Since my last breakup, I do not feel the urge to share my partners with the world anymore." When I asked her if we could be official on Facebook approximately a month after we started dating, she showcased him on social media as if we had never existed. The most difficult part was that she revealed something to him that I had been very insecure about because of her, my past on the internet. I do not know what happened to me, but since that incident I transformed, as I indicated at the beginning of this account. I hardly ever trust anyone fully. I find it challenging to fall in love again, and it is difficult for me to develop that connection once more. It is not that I cannot form connections, but whenever I do establish a bond with someone, my instinct seems to be self-sabotage. I did not cope with the breakup well, and to be fair, I did hurt her after the breakup too. Not physically, I never touched her inappropriately, but I recall how we spoke in the days following the breakup, and I lost control when she said, "You should drink a glass of water, it will be over soon," as I became emotional on the phone. This comment triggered something in me, leading me to express everything that was wrong. That her method of ending things was horrendous, that our issues could have been resolved, and how awful it was for her to hide me, invalidate me, gaslight me, manipulate me, and make me question my confidence and sanity, ultimately betraying me. She never issued an apology and did not know how to take responsibility for her actions. Eventually, her boyfriend began threatening me, and I told him to leave me alone and never to contact me again. It was quite a frustrating situation. However, it has been a year, and I feel remorseful for how I treated her after our breakup. I am not suggesting she did not deserve some of it, but I acknowledge I could have behaved with greater maturity, much greater maturity. I hope to find peace within myself and to begin trusting and loving again as I once did before her. This situation has been extremely challenging. I could have done things differently, obviously. Reflecting on it, I would have taken a different approach, but I am uncertain how much of a difference it would have made. I often wonder what I could have done differently for my personal growth so that I do not repeat these patterns in future relationships. Story 5. I lost my best friend who took his own life at 26, leaving behind a world of inside jokes and shared struggles. "You were one of my only friends that wasn't draining," he told me. "I wish he knew how much he meant to me. How do I move on from this void?" I met him at work when I was 19 years old. He was 23. He and I worked together as a two-person crew installing air conditioners in new construction houses. We worked together for a little over a year until I was laid off. He kept his position because he had been there longer than I had. It was my first full-time job after graduating from trade school. I honestly cannot believe how well we got along. We both grew up on the internet, chronically online, referencing the silliest jokes constantly, and we played the same video games while growing up. It was so nice to be able to laugh about the most ridiculous things together at a company filled with older individuals. We also shared a similar approach to friendship with no tolerance for drama. If one of us had a problem, we simply told the other person directly with no hard feelings. However, we never really experienced major issues with each other and never clashed. Only minor matters arose, and we were quick to apologize and quick to forgive. We would discuss personal matters while working in attics or crawl spaces. We could approach each other with relationship concerns regarding our spouses or family issues, asking, "Am I being unreasonable? Am I out of my mind? Why is this other person upset with me?" We were able to reassure each other that everything was fine, offering different perspectives and helping each other resolve conflicts by simply letting each other vent. For the most part, we also enjoyed similar types of music. Most guys at work listened to metal, rock, or country with little else. I remember the first time he connected his phone to the work truck and shyly played his music. I said, "Dude, don't worry, I listen to a bit of everything. I guarantee my music is worse than yours." Most of the songs he played were ones I had already listened to, and honestly he teased me a lot and barred me from using the auxiliary cable when I played my music a few days later. He was not judging me, it was all in good fun. I do not even blame him, my playlist is quite unusual. Occasionally I would ask to play a new song I found and cue up the oddest mashups. I often joked with him about being old, saying he was born in the 1900s, laughing out loud. He was born in 1998 while I was born in 2002. It was all in good humor. He would tease me for being short even though he was only an inch taller than I was. During lunch breaks, we would get fast food and order together, both trying to pay for the other's meal. We would tussle over the card reader or attempt to trick the other into looking away long enough to pay. In winter, I would give him my jacket because he shivered when it was 60 degrees outside, while I ran like a furnace. He would always tell me that I did not have to enter the unpleasant crawl spaces, but I assured him that I would be right there with him to complete the job. I would not let him do the difficult work alone. Another reason I cherished our friendship was that I struggle with keeping in touch with people, especially when I do not see them every day at work or school. However, even after I was laid off, I could go months without talking to him and would randomly send him a silly TikTok I discovered, after which we would chat and joke as if no time had passed. Occasionally, he would invite me to a 4th of July party, and I would attend, staying far too late with him and all his friends playing card games or Jackbox. Last November, I ended up texting him because I was trying to find a gift for his fiancée for Christmas. Just a few days prior, his fiancée had broken up with him to be with one of her coworkers. They had been together since they were 15 years old in high school, and now they were 26, 11 years together. He was devastated, especially since they lived together and she had not moved out yet, so he had to sleep in the same place as her when she came home late at night, covered in hickeys. She stated she still wanted to be friends and remain in each other's lives. To make matters worse, he had been struggling with his mental health over the past few months and had gone to her for help and support. On the same day he expressed that he felt suicidal, she told him that she could no longer deal with him and broke up with him. Once he confided in me about this, I began spending time with him as often as I could, multiple times a week. I allowed him to spend the night at my place to find some space away from their room. I engaged in long conversations with him, helping him process his feelings and just being there for him while he was upset. Despite having many other friends and a supportive family, all of them rebuked his ex as if she were scum, insisting that he should get rid of her. I was the only one who reassured him that it was okay to still love her, that feeling conflicted was understandable, and that he was grieving her betrayal so deeply because it was as if the person he believed he was with had died. He mentioned several times how much he appreciated my perspective. He said that because I allowed him to process his emotions without demanding that he hate her, it enabled him to gradually accept that he did not want to try to win her back. He expressed his gratitude for having me as a friend, and I conveyed the same sentiment. I assured him that I would always be there to help him no matter what. I shared how much I enjoyed spending time with him, how easy it was to be around him, and how fortunate I felt to have him as a friend. I always appreciated how direct we could be with each other. He told me that I was one of the few friends he had who was not draining to be around, as I did not judge him, and I was never dependent on him to be happy or energetic. Just being together in the same room while scrolling on our phones was enjoyable. I cannot say for certain whether I was his best friend, but he was undoubtedly my best friend. He took his own life in December. His mother called me sobbing to share the news, knowing how close we were. She wanted to know if he had said anything. I was the last person to see him the night before. He came over to hang out and play some board games. He left the games behind at my place instead of taking them with him. I had been looking forward to playing again another day. I miss him so much. It is now April and I still cry over him. I think about him every day. He was truly my only friend. I do not believe I will ever have another friend like him. He meant so much to me. I do not blame him for taking his own life. Many people at his funeral were angry with him. I was not. I understand what it feels like. He wanted to stop hurting. But I still miss him. I wish he had not seen suicide as his only option. I wish he had not been in pain. I am glad I told him how much he meant to me before he passed away. I am thankful we spent that last month together. I am grateful I could convey to him that one of my favorite songs was one he introduced to me. I am thankful I had him as a friend. I am now 23 years old. He will never be older than 26. He was patient, kind, empathetic, funny, honest, wonderful, caring, goofy in the best way, intelligent, generous, and my best friend. And I will never see him again. He is gone. I want my friend back. I miss my friend.